Hello, Gabriel Nekashea. I'm the King of Orien and the author of Orion's Belts. Um, this is going to be part 9, reading through this silly fever dream collection of nonsense surrounding the free-to-play MMO Eve Echoes. Next book is going to be about Eve Echoes as well, but it's going to be a little bit more interactive. But last left off, we were talking about corporations. For an alpha player, they're not really useful. They're cool as like a separate chat. the thing fell off. They're cool as a separate chat, but really they're just like a savings account. Anyway, Orion's Belts, ORBI. Orgiastic dances, nymphs and chances will be the envy of the gods above. The Cult of Dionysus by the Orien Experience. I am self-employed. It's tough to manage my own business and employ the rest of the galaxy as well. I'm only too sorry that the benefits package was so sparse, but hopefully this employee training manual finds you well. Unrelated, but megalomania is in these days. Primarily, I build mining gear. I don't know if y'all can hear the thunderstorm that's coming through outside, but it sounds like it's going to be fun. The clouds didn't look too crazy, but yeah. Primarily, I build mining gear. Rolling your own saves on grind. Orien is 3 jumps away from the Ethereum reach, a hopping handful of steps from what I like to think of as the freelance ITC, and surrounded by low-sec systems. I'm going to share the names I use for some places around the galaxy instead of the actual system labels to preserve a bit of mystery, but a touch of curiosity will reveal where all I tend to run around. All roads lead to the tower. Jita is Clover ITC in my naming system, but Jita is Jita is Jita. There isn't a lot of demand for lower level ships. Being able to corner a below market, below corporate discount rate is easy if you remember to keep a steady supply up to keep stocks building. I sell at about 66% of cost, but buy at about 20%. This gives me around a 2-to-1 conversion for any ISK invested in a given ship. Those numbers have actually changed since I wrote this, and they'll continue to change as the markets do. I've sold every venture up the line to the 3 in this way. There is an implicit ramp provided by the cost to build each, but that ramp exists in other ship classes too. Incidentally, 2s give the best return on investment, but 3s sell fastest. Shuffling ISK up the ramp, getting it to swell in value until it can consistently return passive income for Plex investments was easier while the niches were unexploited. So I am starting to rotate crops and experiment with locational advantages. Only having 10 buys or sells available makes the point of purchase and sale tricky to juggle with the business, but I keep an order or 2 open in case some new desire strikes my fancy. Freelance ITC is ORBI's main access point to the markets. There is a Sun Chaser shortcut that turns the trip to Jita into only 5-ish jumps. I don't use it often, but it's nice to have such a powerful option for moving freight. Secondary markets include Hex Rex ITC and Cake Island ITC. I use them to play with prices. Shipping from each is cheap and easy. When I have the extra liquid, I'll post buy requests for diverse mineral ores, but Hex Rex is a good place to pull C70 when the market's not looking too closely. C60 is a more reliable cash crop out in the open, but C-Space is best risk versus reward and available everywhere for an alpha. Buying and selling Starfarts makes good money, whereas buying Rocks and Rex make good products. Both give good returns, but building feels better. On the far side of Clover, I have operations running out of Demon Head ITC, my timeout base, Sparrowfall ITC, and the leftovers of past exploits in the defunct bases around Eastmost West ITC. There's also Dizzy Deeps ITC closer to home, but that's primarily where I go to mine salt. Turnback ITC is my fortress of solitude. Each ITC in these supply lines is a waypoint in the runs from Jita to Nullsec. Each has a handful of subsidiary bases where I keep a decent spread of toys. There are simple rules for keeping the flow of assets into the forges in Orien pumping. I must sortie out of each base at least once before moving on to the next. This rule is very often broken. The ships that prove themselves get nanocores and little personal mythos to go along with them. My favorites are kept around the freelands for ease of access, but I misplace them all the time. This pull to find lost ships, transports more often than not, keeps me from camping the freelands. Plus, whenever I lose a pod, I am launched as far from Orien as I care to go. This forces me to find a productive way back home. The heartbeat to my circular system is defeat. As a result, I often make more ISK losing than winning. Indulge me as I wax poetic for each outpost and hold. Orion's Belts. Home of 7th Circle Bar and Pleasure House, the Orien system stations are where I keep all of my assets, mostly organized. Other bars include Roxy's, the Toy Box, but Orion's is more of a story hub than a destination in and of itself. The primary stockpile base and the hangar for fully fitted ships are within a couple thousand kilometers of each other. Christening new ships is usually the activity I perform when I swing by home. I use the regional delivery system to move products to freelance markets far more quickly than I can sell them. I go through bulk order and sale periods, the slow breathing of the strange industrial creature ORBI represents. Notable pilots for this area include the Sins, staple characters in every setting I author, though each pilot I pretend to follow has roots here. Freelance ITC. The main commercial outlet for ORBI, most of my product ends up here for sale. Most of my odd orders have here as their destination. When I need to buy from JITA, the transport system fees aren't so extreme that it hurts, but the time it would take to make the trip myself is about the same. The trip takes even less if I splurge for the Sunchaser shortcut. It is nice to have options. There's a middling pace to the operations out of this station. It's a hub, but not an overly active spot like the coasts. My battle cruisers feast on pirate bases. My best miners plumb the depths of nearby condensed spaces. There are plenty of resources, and there is just enough competition to keep things interesting. Battleships will come to visit the local belts looking for easy kills. It's that sort of place. When first scouting out the location, I found it under siege by Sancha forces. I traded a couple transports trying to scavenge whale corpses and realized the constellation had a lot more action than Orien alone suggested. That was the point where I moved all of my short-term investments into Orien. What was supposed to be an outpost to poke at the Ethereum Reach became a manufacturing center for me, all because freelance had free loots. Notable pilots include the explorer, Endless Horizon, and journalist Jeremy Salas. Lupe and the Wolves keep a steady trade in violence. The local pirates feed equipment and bounties to the mining operations out of ORBI, but there are bigger fish elsewhere. It's cozy here. The Scarred Coast. This is the highest tempo coast, right on the border of the Ethereum Reach. There are a couple of player corporations competing for control of the easiest access point. Easiest is in scare quotes. As a result, there is usually an impossible blockage at this point, automated and impenetrable. My favorite miner operates out of the Scarred Coast, Bunny Bradford. She dies more than any other pilot, but also pulls in the greatest profits, both in stories and in ISK. Distant Shore. I park my oddball mining designs here. There is more low-sec traffic here than at the Scarred Coast, and some of the corporations making bids on controlling the Reach have parked stations in the next system over. The folks next door like to party. This is usually where I stage thunder runs into the Reach. The cameras are responsive, but closing the bottle on either the Scarred Coast or just past Midway Point is much less consistent. I've sent mammoths dancing against Asteros out of this base. I've sent unarmed ruptures to their deaths. The adventures in can mining that crop up here are wildly inconsistent, so that I never know how much to invest. Fence sitter that I am, moving more gear in and out of this base instead of sticking around to take advantage of all it has to offer is common. Teddy Love and Maddie Matthews are the main pilots out of here. Teddy flies my favorite mammoths. Maddie dies my favorite deaths. They are a ship. It's all very twee. The Ginger Coast. This is the closest normal entry to null for the freelance. As such, it doesn't get a lot of local play, but is a great launching point for a lot of my personal transportation missions. This coast is a cutoff station between most of the ITCs that see play, and usually the first place I look when a toy goes missing for some odd reason or other. Westgate's, Crimson King, and Tally Hall's Revenge are the three main pilots that live out here. West grabs rocks and mid-range ventures all along the line. Crimson goes on long-haul Cryos runs to feed the beast back in Orien. Tally tests Towel Wars in inappropriate ways. Cake Island ITC. This is the next closest civilized ITC to Orion's belts. It doesn't see much direct play, but is where I run a lot of market tests. I've found more and more excess stock creeping out and away from free lands and getting stuck here. This is likely to be the first base to close down should I need to downsize, but we'll see if it becomes a vacation spot a little closer to home over Demon Head or Sparrowfall. Michael Sacco and his Sons of the Knife rum runners operate out of this base, but they don't see a ton of play yet. When I cash out my Plex and move my belt-eating strippers out to Cake Island, that might change. After I finished this, I actually did the Plex run. I've got enough for 2 more months saved up, but I like playing Alpha more, and I don't need strip miners to make an impact on the market, especially since they have a hard time getting into condensed spaces. So Cake Island didn't end up being my vacation nearly as much as, well, I'll get to it. Force support. This high-security island is where I go whale watching when I want to be a pest. It's a midway point closer to Clover, so it doesn't see a ton of use. Diara Monroe flies a vigil and a handful of Algos to support and defend the local pirate population against the hunters of big bounty business. She switches sides to help any ratters that are willing to stick around. Hex Rex ITC. A lot of C-70 finds itself falling off the back of trucks at this null ITC. Sometimes the trucks are even mine. I find myself picking up those lost goods and giving them new homes. The smugglers' runs between here and Clover are a lot more active than to other coastal locations. There's a friendly population of miners out here that are all skittish, but nice to see all the same. This is just shy of the top end of difficulty I like to throw myself at. Demon Head is more isolated, with more big dick energy splashing around. The locals out there aren't nearly so friendly or adorable. I suspect most of my merchandise ends up out here, whether I sell from here or not. Gypsy Jack Hamilton occasionally flies his exploration stabber, the Zendaya, out of this ITC. Jean Terra and Thrillian Fisk bring home the bacon for ORBI between here, Midway, Snake Mother, and Hollow Hope. Hollow Hope. In a clutch of civilian stations midway between Dizzy Deeps and Hex Rex, things get spooky sometimes. I can't see local chat, but there are plenty of run-ins with surprise blockades, miner hunters, and the like. This is my least active null spot, but a cutoff between more active locations. Even so, the locals make it interesting if I pass through more than twice, or linger more than a minute to catch my breath bashing bounties, or breaking big rocks into little rocks. Starbuck Leo holds the fort here with his handful of Talwars, Thrashers, and transports. Midway Point. At a safe off one of the local planets, Midway is my primary dead drop for running C-70 out of the Reach. There are 2 systems on either side of this point where fiends have emerged from the black to snatch hard-won space farts out of venture holds the hard way. Smuggling past one is no guarantee that the second won't pop up, and fiends are far more mobile blockades. They don't often show closer to where the good stuff grows, likely to keep the way open for the locals. In my headcanon, there's the other one, Magpie Song lives on the planet near this dead drop. She takes a fee from the goods I move through and occasionally joins Endless Horizon in scavenging technology from defunct pirate outposts. The Cove. I'm Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite fishing spot in the black. It's a dead end off of a 3-way split with a nice loop I can run through if a chase gets going. The local fish are big enough that a chase isn't likely, but the dead drop in system is great for mammoth runs should I get a good mining streak going. It's an obvious place for hunters to come looking, but not too obvious. I've found myself in a pod moments after landing in a belt. I've gathered gases for hours at a stretch. It's a crapshoot. Rodney Love, Teddy's brother, tends to hang out around here. He and Bunny have a thing going. Strictly professional, of course. Dizzy Deeps ITC. This ITC is closest to the Snake Mother staging point. When I want to vent my spleen on strangers, I ship arms and equipment here to enable the shenanigans I get down to out at the Snake. This is the most likely next step for expanding after Cake Island as a nullsec ITC. I worry it doesn't see enough traffic to prove interesting. Still, it's deeper in, meaning there are far more routes out than any of the other deep darks ORBI operates out of. Jimmy27 is the branch manager out here. He used to be one of the wolves before he gave up his call sign Fennec and went back to something a bit more discreet. It's quiet. He likes it that way. I actually didn't expand to Dizzy after I finished this. Hex Rex became the star of the show because it was closer. It wasn't like closer to Snake Mother, but it was closer to a bunch of other interesting places. And when I started on Operation Ignition, I decided to do something that was a lot more friendly to new players. So that's actually very close to Clover. So Dizzy is probably on the back burner at least until 2 or 3 operations from now, if I go that far. It depends on how much fun I have playing with the first one. Anyway, Snake Mother Stage. The local corporations like to swing capital ships at one another out here, but have no idea how to deal with smaller, cheaper ships. They scramble interceptors and the like readily enough, but will drop a cap interdiction destroyer combo without actually tackling their prey. This makes playing with them quite satisfying. There are a whole mess of stations I can salt mine off of that haven't delivered defensive actions yet. Bonetta Bonnet operates out here with a bevy of Black Ops hounds, training cruisers, and a lone Vexor fleet issue. Poking the local talent in the eyes has resulted in several silly camera kills. I have a lot of stories I could tell out of Snake Mother. There's been some really interesting drops just by sending a rifter after a camera. Yeah. Anyway, turn back ITC. This is the farthest ITC from any other, averaging 37 jumps to any other point of trade in the galaxy. There are a few back roads to get to it, not much in the way of resources compared to other nullsec spots. It is here I shall retire to a life of ease as an Omega. And I did. After I finished the book, I spent a couple months as an Omega out of Turnback ITC, and I've got a load of toys and resources just kind of stockpiled up there. And a pretty good smuggling operation to get them out of there. So, least said in the book, but most done after. It was fun. I might go back. We'll see. We'll see after the next one. Clover ITC. Jita. Or Jita. Depends on how you want to say it. I've heard all sorts of different pronunciations. Anyway, back to the book. Jita. The galactic center of trade is always packed with capsular clones. They claim to offer the best prices, but company stores are where the real commercial action takes place. Advertisements clog the local chats, promising contracts too good to be true. Item offers are above cost. Buy orders are posted at fractions of fractions to flip the goods of unsuspecting sell-all requests. It's a swindler's paradise, predating on young pilots with all the candor and grace of a dockside doxy. The locals are friendly in the same way herpes might be considered a party favor. Jita sucks the life out of the galaxy a few ISK at a time. April Smalls sells used ships here when she's not buying food stamps off of local addicts. The professionals do odd jobs for ORBI as kindred spirits to the Sins. Mostly they run cargo out to all corners, virtually unmolested. Rebel Country. On the coast of Syndicate Space, midway between 2 ITCs, Rebel Country is a mining and exploration outpost that's fallen out of favor of late. The Gaslands and Westmost East ITCs both had all of their industrial stockpiles consolidated on the far side of the galaxy when Orion's Belts was first founded. The town is dying. There's a pocket of defunct goods hidden in one of the nearby stations. A mountain of cat statues, odd documents, and priceless artifacts gather dust near where scrappy pilots gather dust of a different sort. Cassius Cloud goes by Cash for short. They don't like strangers and does the best they can not to stay a stranger for long. What used to be a central point for the companies that merged to become ORBI barely sees anyone passing through, but vacations out here make any pilot sign a welcome sight. That's actually going to be more of a key player, in Operation Ignition as a jumping off point. It'll probably be the next operational focus. We'll see how Ignition's last few missions shape up. But I really like the interplay between Westmost East and Gaslands. I might even change those names, but Westmost East makes the most sense. Gaslands less so. Sparrowfall ITC. The second farthest ORBI ITC away from Freelands, there is a cultural rivalry between the two. It's a staging point for excursions out to Demon Head, midway between Cope Village and Karen Academy. The cost to move product out here from Null generally outweighs the benefit. May as well go all the way and deliver to Clover or Freelands. Resources pool here before going out to Demon Head, but only briefly before they are committed to either Cope for the hard way or Karen for the easy road. Easy is a 4-letter word. Avalanche 46 hangs out here. She'll visit Cash on occasion, but takes her responsibilities, small as they are, too seriously to stay long. Slavers and blood runners stop off here, but she doesn't know a thing about that illicit trade. No, sir, no notion whatsoever. Cope Village. There are two main forking paths out to Demon Head ITC. Cope is the last civilized stop for the Cope is the last civilized stop for the faster, less safe route. Goods tend to pile up here, awaiting runs to support my timeout station. Those goods tend to get got, making their way through the insurance system, out there one way or the other. It's grim. ORBI's Delbert Conover ends up reading most of the kill mails posted by pirates along the pipes out to Demon Head. Call it job security. Committing to the causeway breeds courage or cowardice in kind. Karen Academy. The newest post at time of writing, Karen's is very similar to Distant Shore in that it's an off and out of the way alternate route. As an easier path, goods don't stick around long. Sitting still doesn't make ISK. Stopping here for some safe, slender rest is still essential. Easier doesn't mean harmless. Few ships go through without encountering a mobile gate camp prowling for prey. At least the locals are free with their planetary goods and cameras. Jay Janis monitors the traffic, popping out in a shuttle every now and then to visit busier climes. There's actually a few really good fountains for fuel. People who have multiple Omega accounts tend to stick around Karen Academy, and they tend to vent their stuff into space, so free ISK if you know where to look. Demon Head ITC. This is where I end up when I've pushed my luck too far. It's time out. Any goods or resources ordered tend to find themselves lost. There's a reason the minerals on sale are so cheap. Rarely do they make it back to Clover whole and sound. There is an active community out here despite the isolation. Bare bones, I do my best to keep the only vessels operating out here the ones either lost in battle or gathered from the local debris. Think of it like the big scrapyard in the sky for those who fell short of Fiddler's Green. The smuggler who runs Damascus Road from Demon Head to Sparrowfall most often is Danny Savage. She's like all my ex-partners combined. I love what experiences I had with her. I hate having necessarily had those experiences with her. I wish her well. She just wishes. I really don't like that. I wrote that. That was stupid. And I need a better character for out there. With this, with the timeout base actually playing a role with the Serpentis pirates, I'm definitely going to change that story-wise. Rag and Bone Mansion. Oof. If Orion's Belts is home, this is my winter mansion. When I get my pod popped for doing something foolish, this is where I tend to operate until I feel I've done my time. It's right outside Demon Head, but there are few, if any, competing explorers. Just a couple runs result in mountains of rare minerals. Most go towards my Cinnable build fund as either ISK or raw materials, but the ramp to that dream is long and steep. There's a loose confederation of unaffiliated corporations around the manse. I've thought about knocking on doors and getting to know the locals, but flying by night feels more right. This is a place of idle wealth and prosperity. Twin explorers, Rose and Raina Lee, take turns turning T10 systems into my personal playgrounds. Mining belts is unsafe in one system, but completely acceptable in the richer one next door. It's a strange, dreamlike location that conjures Black Butler for some reason. Rag and Bone is actually more of a staging point for the outer curve at this point. I've added a few more bases. Yeah, I keep going off on tangents, excuse me. Uncle Grundle's Hut. This is the back door to the Black. There is nothing of value for an alpha beyond this coast, but plenty of my old Omega toys tucked out and away from civilization. This shithole has some high-class equipment to haul, but little point in taking care of it. And Uncle Grundle is just the worst. He's a great smuggler, he's a decent mercenary, he's a vain blister of a creature passing for human on the ass end of the universe. Tsar Holm. This is the most far-flung place I visit. There's a massive stockpile of planetary materials from back when I paid to play. They are stuck. Pulling them to Demon Head takes multiple hours to do safely, and there are so many Omega toys at that far end that there's no play to be had outside of whatever ship I use to make the run. All risk, no reward. I've made worse bets. I keep it labeled as a place to take deep expedition vacations to. Getting good scanning ships out there would require either charting a new course or zigzagging out and back. This is the third most likely location to get rolled into the usual rotation, but certainly not anytime soon. Qingxi Jones watches over my beloved exploration Noctis. After I finished this book and got Omega, I actually cleared that base out. It's still, I don't know if Tsar Holm is still labeled. I know it's still a cutoff, but I actually use Uwu Kitten Ranch as the midway point from Demon Head to Turnback. And it's still a challenging loop, but there's a lot more cutoff points, so I don't rely on Tsar Holm nearly as much as I used to, and I think I actually emptied it. Unnamed locations. Anything that doesn't wind up in a bookmarked location becomes a mission in its own right. I had something like 30 different ships posted up in Tama and Tazy until recently. Trit is in bloom all over the place, a real Trit storm out there. There are dozens of other such stockpiles like Easter eggs I hid from myself over the years. Base building. There is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. Peter Goose Drucker. Probes and rifters feel out for new places when I get the urge to expand. They don't often linger long. Committing to a spot requires something to make the stay worthwhile. Free treats in the area help. After prospecting some wild unknown, then come the miners and mischief makers. I have a mountain of ventures and a small hill of venture twos. Talwars and Thrasher twos serve as frontline scouts. A smattering of specialist options follow suit, should things remain interesting. The pressure to expand has a countervailing pull back towards the freelance hub. I play Eve Echoes the same way I play Craps. The goal is to cover a nice bit of territory to pay off, knowing full well each expenditure is a bet against my attention span. The more operational projects I take on, the less likely any are to culminate. It's hard not to spread too thin with so many characters running around in the wild looking to recruit through violence. Each base has a handful of loosely defined operational goals. The resources placed in a space determine the tactics available to achieve those goals, but the locals get a vote too. It's tough to find a use for a battlecruiser in HiSec, for example, that doesn't include the mission system. Destroyers are useful everywhere. Operational goals over doctrine doesn't work for everyone. Some people need direction. Where conflict arises is when ambition meets the need for direction. That's the point where boots start looking tasty and the appearance of power seems about as good an identity as any. People self-project their identities into oblivion that way. Buggy the Clown was cool, but Luffy did it better. Not everyone wants to be told what to do in their playthrough. It's very easy to get lost in the options, dreaming away any semblance of effectiveness. It's tough to meet both directional needs. The sweet spot is the middle, grown to from either above or below. For Omega junkies looking to ease off the dependence on expenditure, higher-end alpha ships are a fraction of the cost for even the lowest Omega grinder. For alphas looking to drop old Neddies a bone, investing with play but paying for nanocore minigames is a happy balance that doesn't demand subservience. In either case, playing the Plex market pays far better than getting played by it. Find a home and make it yours. If it's in a null corp, more power to you, but they will have needs. It is easier to deal with corporate thirst from a place of prosperity. The simplest way to enjoy gestures wildly at the universe is to hit the Initiate Acquisition button on the buyer's page for a product you fancy. Order as you may, but be sure to set your price wisely. The higher you pay, the more likely folks will deliver. Whatever your pleasure, creation, destruction, or discovery, having a home or 3 will keep things interesting. Do a little something to make each place better before visiting the next. Single-minded pursuit is a lot of investment in any flawed thing. All things are flawed. Last bits of base building basics before getting into the tactical stuff. Station transports at operational bases over ITCs. There is nothing more annoying than turning a 1-leg milk run into a 2-legged out and back. Don't be afraid to stage ships in steps to test capabilities by degrees, but understand that optimizing for each tier has very different demands. A battlecruiser built to bully T4 bases will find itself outgunned by elites in T5s and up. A destroyer used to dancing outside the reach of smaller craft might find itself missing a few key parts trying the same tactic against bigger prey. There is always the potential for a successful sortie the next system over. Don't settle. Do your best to do something different every play session. Deploying capabilities are best done in a sort of donut bell curve shape from home base. The baby brain children, untested and unknown, lay near their foundings towards the center. The lower cost, high utility workhorses ideally line the outer periphery of a player's position. Old warriors, long in the tooth and looking for death, seek impossible odds. Send them to the front to die as Spartans. The main force leans from the middle. Where opportunity arises, naval favorites respond. This strategy becomes only stronger with Omega options to sprinkle in among the alphas. Still, I would toss a dozen mammoths into the fire before testing the metal of a single wreath at the outskirts of my empire. It's actually not true. I've sent wreaths to the to the depths. I don't think I've lost any in that endeavor, just because there's some easy backdoors that I didn't know about at time of writing. But yeah, gear is similarly dished out. Losing T0 rigs to test runs on the front or at the proving grounds is what they exist for. Losing T1s hurts more. T2s are the sweet spot. To an alpha, the loss of T3s hurts most, but must be acceptable. All vessels are built to spill on occasion. The king has but one costume, the playwright has that and more. Trust me, any artist knows that to be a king is one thing, to be a knight is another. But once a knight is never enough. Inputs and outputs. Fight for the sake of duty, treating alike happiness and distress, loss and gain, victory and defeat. Fulfilling your responsibility in this way, you will never incur sin. Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Experience will teach inputs. It takes experimentation to discover what is good, what is evil, and in what mixture anything may be. Know which ores to gather for mineral variety, which to grab for specific mineral efficiency, which for cash, and which for a good time. Know where to go to gather gear, bounties, both, or simply to attempt survival. Know where the people are and where they are not. Each moment has something to gain, even if it is just the satisfaction of breathing on the right side of the airlock. Consolidation will teach outputs. Gratitude first. Missing something to be thankful for is missing out on happiness. It takes the surrender of past gains to transmute new opportunities. Knowing when to nurture and when to pare away is a sort of internal exploration in why the center cannot hold. At the core of every mortal is a mimetic crystallization. We get set in our ways. Play keeps that stagnation away as long as possible, but eventually the gods and devils get their due. This game ain't for everyone. It has something for anyone, but certainly not for everyone. Eve Echoes is ever a sandbox for castles and marbles and mud pies. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. Even the smallest workflow can help smooth things out. Adding a fork in that workflow gives a release to pressure. Setting processes up doesn't need to be a formal thing. Bookmarks are more than enough to get the flow going, slow and steady. Remember always that hostility and danger are inputs and outputs too, often more experientially valuable than any resources gained. I've had my heart rate raised more in scraps over scrap metal than in billion ISK snatch and grabs. You never know what you're dealing with until you count the chips at the end of the game. Building bases is more art than science. Take a mining base, for example. If it's on the frontier, a Venture 3 is more useful as a rock hauler than as pirate bait. A mountain of spare Ventures, Venture 2s, or oddball survivor miners is the best spread. For familiar territory, full of hidey holes, bringing out the best Venture in the fleet beats any smaller boat hands down. Smaller support vessels are good to have for picking up the pieces, so a handful of 2s and such awaiting either the front or a turn in saving the day can go a long way. Near home, get weird. Experiment. A mammoth can mine, but slowly. The same spread works for violent craft. The same spreads work for violent craft. The same for exploration. Mixing and matching works across the board as well. Once the tree of inputs and outputs is good and growing, consider seeding new spots. I love mobile homes. Trying to fit as much variety into a single terra is quite the challenge. So far, my favorite spread uses a Cryos, Venture, Stabber, and their fittings. A do-everything destroyer or cruiser is good for dipping a toe in too, but diversifying assets yields the best results. Planting flags gets interesting by scouting out hostile spaces. The search gets more interesting only with new options for expansions. What'd that base do? What are its inputs and outputs? Minerals in for products or profits. Rocks in for minerals or profits. Ships in for violence or profits. What'd that navy do? Almost always the naval answers are rum, sodomy, and the lash. Have things to do at each base. Things going towards the strategic center of your operations. Things coming from that center. To test your operational conditions, use a random mission generator for each operation along the supply line. Roll a d20 for each ship at the base. Highest result gets play. In any case, figure it out. Connective tissues. I need to be getting on my way. 1,000,000 miles away by the offspring. Establishing supply lines between bases is like taking pills. Test them one at a time or risk your health, even more than necessary. Just because I like to roam far and wide as the winds doesn't mean there isn't value in keeping bases clustered. Multiple stations in the same system with names, if not purposes, is how most people keep organized. Each step along a journey matters. Having cutoff points to expand and pivot from opens up more opportunities. Think of these cutoffs as checkpoints between destinations. It helps them gather resources if they branch. Excuse me. We're gonna adjust. Think of these cutoffs as checkpoints between destinations. It helps them gather if they branch. The most basic galactic trade is in sugar and spice, trit and pyrite. The smallest substances ebb and flow with the needs of the big whales. Flipping trit from 1 isk to 2 is neat, but slow. Twisting spice from 3 isk to pull 4 is less rewarding and just as slow, but honest work. Just as money has a velocity, so do assets. Buying above market rate will move it towards you. Selling below will move it away. This is basic. Beneath those entry points is a network of mineral movers. The rate of flow of spice or any asset depends on the ships involved. The spice must flow. In physics, work is measured in joules and is defined looser than marine morals as force along a distance. I use a similar metric called oomph, defined as multiplying volume by warp speed. The better a result, the greater the oomph. It's a loose heuristic that doesn't account for align speed, but it's nice to think about when slapping undervalued hyperspatial velocity optimizer rigs on my long haulers. Just as I like to compare values based on isk per stats, oomph per isk is a cursed and benighted spreadsheet among the many that tickle my data analyst's soul. Calculating the oomph value is cost per meter moved and comparing it to the cost of delivery. Long story short, mammoths and cryos are the best transports. The cryos wins out for long hauls. The mammoth is the queen of the last mile. Terras are almost as good as mammoths for that last leg, as they can move more generic volume, but unless the markets catch up in recognizing utility and price them accordingly, they're overhyped. The Imicus High Mobility offers the best oomph per isk by a lot, but is only useful for devoted hauls. Smuggling for others doesn't pay as well without the collateral. The Imicus High Mobility warps at 5.5, with 10,100 storage space stock. Trouble is, you have to pay to load it. Of the 4 main haulers, the Bestower is the least useful. They are hyper-specialized. I've used mine maybe twice, and the end result was to get snubbed trying to sell structure parts at JITA. To move a lone Capsuleer outpost, the Terra would be the better bet than the Bestower, and it's not even close. Terra offer more utility over time. Rocks are big and fluffy, if you're hard enough to use them as pillows. Unlike minerals, which are all the same size, each of the ore have their own volumetric requirements. For alphas, all ores lose volume when they're reprocessed. If there were more variety on the markets, there might be some advantage to considering the rocks with the best density to value. As it stands, it's easier to just play the field, ladies. Moving minerals from mining bases to market makes more money per trip than hauling the rocks, but also loses the most in translation. Moving the rocks most benefits those omegas with the skills required to squeeze the most out of those goods. Skills determine which path is more profitable, but generally, moving the rocks to sell and buying the minerals is how the system is supposed to translate. Once you're at the maximum reprocessing skills across the board, you can spreadsheet it out and determine what ores are worth for you to reprocess it versus haul, but that's a lot of recreational math based on a few slowly shifting variables. It's easier to flip assets by placing orders below market value and selling at a tolerable pace wherever you want. At JITA, you can undercut a bit tighter than elsewhere, but there's no need to haul goods all that way when you could make multiple short hops in the same amount of time. It's called a revenue stream, not a revenue geyser. Lucky strikes happen, but usually when a whale leaks. Metas shift, and ships go out of style. People sell all of their assets swearing never to return again. They want attention. It's a whole thing. Bases are pools of wealth. You are a lone paddle. There are invisible flows beneath the surface, but you can feel them. With effort, you can guide them. Others are paddling too, though, so it's easier if you have either a team of folks tugging the undertow with you, a bigger paddle, or just a whole lot more oomph. You can hire out. The corporations will work and employ for indies as well as in-house. Paying at or above corporate rate gets the job done, but slowly. Paying above market value gets it quicker, but not always. Paying transport fees get it done almost as quickly as just going and hauling the goods yourself, but that's time you could be spending doing literally anything else. Like playing. Optimum consistent income for a lone ratting alpha is about 6 million ISK per hour, more or less for an optimized cruiser, battlecruiser, or destroyer. Omegas can get about 10 times that and then some. The gains far outweigh the losses to just do what you want, and let me and my ilk haul your rocks and minerals out and your munitions in. Folks are missing out on a lot of potential income by going straight to the hole instead of building systems of interest and joy, ladies. Informal rosters. You're gonna need a bigger boat, Chief Brody and Jaws. Bases develop naturally, but if you want to take the shortcut and stockpile assets to get the ball rolling, here are a few recipes to follow. This is cooking, not baking. Cooking is science for hungry people. Baking is black magic. Don't get too detail-oriented and you'll be just fine. Remember, destroyers can do it all, if poorly, so keep a few patrol boats on hand to sprinkle as you may. They are the secret ingredient. Love is a destroyer. Mining outposts. Expect to see rocks, ventures, a mammoth or two, explorers, prospectors, and a cryos nearby if not at the base itself. Post more bait ships if the fish are jumping. Post more farmers if the locals aren't too frisky. High security rocks offer more good stuff relative to waste compared to low security locations, but the good stuff ain't worth as much. They advantage strippers, but omegas don't tend to take that advantage. More focused efforts advantage riskier environments over time. Knowing these points, pick your battles wisely, friend. The rocks might not shoot back, but there's plenty of human resources folks looking to lodge complaints in hulls. Trade hubs. If it's not an ITC, it should be near one. Expect piles of product, specialized transports, explorers, and cryos for moving towards and away from JITA as purposes take your efforts. Timing the conversions of assets to liquid ISK is speculation. Speculation is literally just gambling, unless there is insider knowledge. If you can become an insider to corporate metas, all the better, but for an alpha, it is easier to gain by shorting the mids and acquiring as much of the alpha top end as we can manage. That's less location dependent than what goes down at JITA, but the closer to the hub you go, the easier it is to move product. Manufacturing centers. These require minerals and materials, product yet to move or deploy, and Terra if there isn't an ITC in the region. Blueprints can be imported, but it's better to research them in place, as the recs that drive their production double as materials for rigs if you don't mind a bit of inefficiency. Cooking is fun. Mise en place applies as readily to dries and wets as it does to minerals and planetary materials. Farm or garden to table is fun, even in pixel form. Points of insurgency. These dens of violence are packed chockers full of anger, red scanners, cheap disposable aggression, covert operations vesicles, Molotov cocktails, blackjack, sex workers, and the occasional sense of humor. Stealth bombers, disposable cruisers, and censorships make salt mining easier. Soft targets nearby without chaperones make it easier. The reclamation of abandoned spaces is as punk as it gets. If the locals cared, they would come play. Exploration roosts. For exploration bases, location is more important than what the base contains. You want a space with a lot of books, difficult terrain, and dangerous but lazy neighbors. Dead ends are ideal, the more the better. Explorers farm space itself. We like long walls or tall trees for climbing and secrets for sharing. The best of us do it all. The worst of us do it all too, but for pay. Kill on sight, friend, it would be a service. Frigates, destroyers, cruisers, any ship with multiple mid-slots makes for a good explorer. Some are better than others, but even a blind squirrel gets a nut if it sniffs around long enough. Fleet operations. I started throwing base, she started throwing back mid-range. Just a Friend by Biz Markie, covered by Tally Hall. Oh baby, you got what I need, but you say he's just a friend. You say he's just a friend. Null security corporations offer grand scale action, but at a cost. The best will help folks get ships to fit their doctrines. The worst will expect folks to equip to their specifications without offering an on or off ramp should their needs change. A good FC is hard to find. Fleet commanders are even harder to become. Major actions that result in raw stat checks kill an FC's career while bolstering the victors. This makes the wealthy rise, while the rest are ignored. The best leaders are like orchestral conductors in that the best conductors have a touch of the composer about them. The worst are drummers, as liable to lay into the band as the leathers. It's not their fault. Imagine having multiple conversations at once while trying to herd cats into position to pounce on a pack of wolves. It's a tough gig. Leading others with meat on the line takes a certain degree of crazy. Luck helps. Discipline helps more in both the forces and in the commander. The trouble starts when Athena gives way to Ares and folks prefer the taste of blood to the touch of knowledge. It doesn't stop until a failure cascade shatters the mimetic construct underpinning the focal personality's thrusting point. Those best equipped to command are the least likely to demand the position. When the goal is to both kill the other guy and come home, folks tend to get confused over which goal is worth more over time. The loud ones fear loss and lean... Hello. Excuse me. The loud ones fear loss and lean towards gains as a result. Ironically, this works until it doesn't. Then they lose more than anyone else. The quiet ones tend to value lessons learned and appreciate losses on the personal level, but cannot in good conscience send others to lose on their behalf. They rarely dare, and so only gain glory if their hand is forced. It's easier to get a quiet one to go loud than a loud one quiet. Just wait. We are all empty barrels at birth. Over time we fill. Take the emotional juices out of anyone and they'll get louder. Some folks get holes that keep them loud. Some get a lot of juices keeping them quiet. Some are like bells, drained of all but the hardest stuff, ready to rattle around. Better a cup than a bell. Bells crack with use. The ideal leader is someone who can both ask and answer questions while remaining willing to admit when they're unsure. The best knows when to intervene with a shout and when a look is enough to get the job done. Even then, success is never guaranteed. The louder a leader is, the easier they are to follow. The more folks follow a leader, the farther they're likely to move. Mass has inertia. Cliffs have a habit of surprising such hordes. Best become a leader of the self first before looking for someone to follow. That requires learning when and how to follow in the first place, though, so there's no way but to live. The main body of any fleet needs support to prevent shattering against a more prepared body. Alphas can serve in these roles, but tend to be ignored by major powers. There is an expectation of investment that comes with being an Omega. Alphas make the best scouts and spies. Scouts and spies are always welcome tools in any commander's arsenal. Scouts are preferred. A good scout doesn't need an interceptor to get the job done. If they can survive landing on a blockade, they can keep tabs on it. Interceptors can breeze through such blocks, sure, but a scout's job is to provide intelligence more than to tackle stragglers. Such skirmishers are better employed as cavalry than as outriders. Spies are like scouts that operate within an enemy's body. Spies dabble in mistrust, making them difficult to use, but far more circumstantially effective over time than scouts. In battle, spies can become a vulnerability. All a sound commander needs to do is keep their forces organized over time to suss out which arm draws fire more easily than the others. In a game full of catch-as-catch-can fleets, that's hard to pull off, so spies are often overrepresented. Most major fleet actions end up massing to apply force. Smaller, more focused actions applied over a broader time and space can erode such forces out from under their own masses. There is a mimetic calcification to any organization that does not erode and heal from within. What does not grow brittles and is eroded from without. Things fall apart. The center will not hold. Folks hate traitors more than the enemy, which is where the curve of Ouroboros comes from. Even the most rigid structure cannot survive forever. In fact, most end up self-destructing as sharp edges rub where fractures are found. When parts break away, what remains tends to attempt to become harder. This just accelerates the failure cascade. Consider Prince Rupert's teardrops as physical examples of what the hardest organizations may aspire to. Too stiff a breeze at just the right spot and pop. Smaller organizations are naturally easier to maintain. Not that relationships are easy, but when they start out, they tend to carry a kind of momentum of their own. Friend groups are often most stable at 5 individuals plus or minus 2. This magic number coincides with the short-term cognitive load of the average human being. Let's look a single connection between 2 apes up and down before we start considering more complex structures. Folks want enough similarity to relate to, but enough difference to keep things interesting. Most want more in common than different, but that varies with openness to experience. The variety is necessary to cover down and challenge. The similarity is necessary to understand and relate. Too much difference over time and folks grow apart. Too few and folks risk growing bored. There is always some of each for those able to look, but it's tough. What holds your interest is not you. Sharing this game, any game really, with another is something to cherish. If you're both aimed at the same goal, then all the better. Dancing with another is the dream. The more they know what they're doing, then the more exciting the dance can become. Juggling aggro allows for ships to take on seemingly impossible tasks. This calls for being able to dish damage and take it in kind. Mine and haul operations are the lifeblood of any industrial corp, but even just 2 people doing that little wiggle together can have a grand time, especially in dangerous territory. Exploration blends with any other goal. Finding harder fights and harder rocks makes finding fun easier. Cover each of those operational goals with the components of a fleet, and it doesn't matter what opportunities it stumbles across. Focus fire on any specific aspect, and the whole will necessarily be greater than the sum of its parts. Traditionally, folks X up in a corporation's chat to get added to a fleet. What happens after is between you and the FC. Building ships. I need a 37 inseam 22 waist double stitched with a 5-inch neck. Destroyer of Worlds by Coyote Kid. Love that song. Lo, I am become death, but I don't really know what that means yet. It's my first day on the job, and I want to look my best. Historically, there is a kind of multilinear parody that developed as ships grew from humble frigates iteratively to the biggest battleships. There are good reasons why scale stopped them from getting bigger. War of the Worlds by H.G. Top Shelf Wells did well enough telling the tale, but the mighty falling to the tiny isn't cinematic, or even if the second hand ticks all the way eventually. Geoffrey West's book, Scale, is a good hint, but the short version is this: over-specialization cannot support itself. For a deep look at naval history, Drakeneffel's YouTube channel is the best. Drakeneffel is amazing. Like, he does naval stories really well and actually knows the ins and outs of, like, the technical design of the ships. Like, he's I don't know how he does it. He's really cool. For a deep look at science fiction strategies, consider Isaac Arthur's channel. I didn't write this in there either, but like, Isaac Arthur's channel is inspirational in its own right. He's been at it for years, and he tells such technically difficult subject matter with he overcame a speech impediment and is just he's an inspiration in his own right too. I love Isaac Arthur, Drakeneffel. Anyway, sadly, the competitive side of Eve Echoes tends to eat its content creators. Maybe I will return, probably not. This comes just as Gromeyer is retiring. There is basically nobody left of the main line, other than Rambo and the Echoes of New Eden podcast, but like, all the big money players got eaten by, the cost, I would assume, but also the lack of content that the game that they're playing generates. If you play a numbers game based on throwing your wallet at the competition, eventually folks are going to get tired of spending money just to brag. Sadly, the competitive side of Eve Echoes tends to eat its content creators. Maybe I will return, probably not. It's tough to appreciate the little things. The biggest toys are neat, but they're not daily drivers. At least, not for long. Fitting basics. And red is such a lovely color on you. The Dismemberment Song by Blue. Blue Kid? Blue Kid. It should be Blue Kid, not Blue. I think I edited that, but I'm not sure. Starts, hold still, my dear. Yeah, that's a fun song in its own right. Really graphic, grim, and hilarious. Each ship has its own flight statistics. It's best to feel these out, but effectively, the bigger the ship, the harder it is to move around. Locally slow doesn't necessarily mean slow in warp. In fact, the best jumps start when you mix high agility with low local speed. It's tricky to mix the two. Specializing makes for efficiency, but presents vulnerability through opportunity costs. A bigger fork is a worse spork, is a worse spoon, is a worse knife, for example. Ships ain't so different. Ships have a power grid that restricts what can be attached. If you pretend a vessel is a wizard from some other lesser game, power grid is kind of like spell slots, with capacitor being their mana to use whatever spells are on their tray. Modules are spells, actions, attacks, whatever. Every vessel has up to 3 types of modules it can fit, plus nanocores, riggings, and implants. Nanocores are rare enough that they can be considered a bit like hero-class designators in a real-time strategy game. Implants are Omega territory and beyond the scope of this work. If you long press on any module that is attached, you can see how its stats compare to modules you might long press that aren't attached. High slots hurt things. Rocks are things, so are people, though it's rude to say so. Mid slots touch things inappropriately, but don't cost much power grid, so that's nice. Actually, I don't think that's nice. Since time of writing, I recognized that there's a lot of frigates out there that provide bonuses to mid slots, but when the power grid cost of a mid slot is 1, like an 80% cut on that 1 compared to, what other ships pay for it, is really stupid. I think NetEase needs to raise the cost for mid slots across the board to actually give those smaller vessels purpose and reason to exist, and make it harder for big bulky battleships and the like to justify the costs of them. But I don't know. I think the game should be harder overall on the rich to give a better on ramp for new players. Like, if you need to use new players or have new players in your fleet to survive, you're going to look for new players. Anyway, I ranted, excuse me. Low slots, mid slots touch things inappropriately, but don't cost much power grid, so that's nice. Low slots primarily mess with the ships they're attached to. There are exceptions. There are always exceptions. Higher level ships have rigging slots that allow for further customization. Ships have shields, armor, and structure. Shields are better at soaking more physical attacks, while armor absorbs energy more effectively. Structure tends to get hurt equally across the board. That's a bit like saying people have skin, flesh, and bones. Shields come back on their own passively. Armor takes a bit more work but sticks. Bones breaking is bad. Ship bones breaking is bad, but bigger. Them's the rope. Them's the rope, excuse me. Let's add a few knots. Every module comes in small, medium, and large varieties. Alphas mostly just have access to the medium and small varieties, but those classifications are really more like guidelines than hard and fast rules. Rapid-fire missiles straddle the fence. Propulsion modules often do as well, but only for certain ships. Bigger means it hits harder, but is usually harder to hit with. Players can increase their skills to specialize. Skills are a much bigger deal for Omegas. Improving any aspect of a ship generally takes focusing skills on that aspect, but the end result for an alpha usually adds about half the effectiveness just having the ship offers. That bonus is nothing to sneeze at, but won't usually make a tactical difference unless somebody's asleep at the wheel. Clear as mud? Alright, I am at an hour, and from here, like I actually break down the ship scales. I kind of want to keep going because this section is it's relatively short. It's another 5 pages, more fitting, and the reward is going to be a few of my favorite ships, and I'd rather start with that next time. So I'm going to keep trucking just for the next few pages. You're getting a little extra today. Frigates. Gotta bust that box, gotta gut that fish. Wolf Like Me by the Listros. Frigates are the best. They are itty-bitty triangles on the plot, and adorable. Small but mighty, these little guys can do anything. Frigs are the most tactically flexible craft in New Eden. Most are agile enough to land in hot water and jump before the serious cooking begins. There is a frigate for every operational goal, though they are the least effective specialists in the game, with a few key outliers. The quieter you are, the easier it is to hear. Scanning frigs have small scanning signatures. Rigs can make them smaller still. The smaller the source radius, the harder the ship is to lock onto, a boon to any smuggler. Think of frigs like speedboats or soft bodies. They don't take much to get zipping along. At a couple thousand meters per second out in the black, even scanning down a little guy will take enough time to buy them some space to warp off. This makes even the lowest level frigates a pain to pin down without either a faster chasecraft or good prediction skills. Usually, frigs don't take much to sink. They don't take much, but they can take what matters. Snatch and grab operations take a light touch with small hands to pull off without losing a finger or 3. Of course, most miners are frigates, whether they're venturers, prospectors, or explorers looking for tougher packing peanuts to fill the emptiness in their hearts or holds. They're cute little snacks. Small and swift as they may be, any explorer has the potential to be a mobile loot box for the patient. Don't let their size fool you. Faction frigs can be tankier than an alpha can take. Even primarily targeting little guys with a bigger battlecruiser means little in the face of a blinged out succubus. The cheapest ships in the game pay for themselves right quick. Most reimburse their commission with only a handful of flights tops. They take little bites out of the galaxy, but no less sweet. Investing in a frigate is way easier than investing in any other type of ship. They take small modules, but upsizing an afterburner isn't undesirable in sprinters looking to keep a low profile. The main tech tree branches into 3 paths, not counting interceptors. Assault frigates aim to rush in, tackle a target, and survive the brief bit of time necessary for backup ships to apply more substantive damage. They do a mean interceptor impression. Mostly, they bully NPCs, but they make for good entry-level hunters, especially for small gangs. Covert ops crafts are the upper tier. Excuse me, real quick. There we go. Covert ops crafts are the upper tier utility craft for an alpha. Though they lack slots, they make up for it with the best ISK to neutral cargo bay ratio at any price point. Stealth bombers are built to punch above their weight. They can fit medium torpedo bays to dish out cruiser levels of damage with the safety of a harder-to-spot body. Even without their special station-chewing bomber modes, they're good at asking the neighbors for a cup of sugar. Omegas get access to Inties, the only ships capable of ignoring bubbles. They're not impossible to kill with the right tools and automation, but they're the safest, but not fastest, couriers available. Yes? Thank you, my love. The dragon fruit with the lemonade, huh? Delicious. Thanks again. Well. Oh, if you have access to an Asian market, get frozen dragon fruit. And like, my sweet savage just made me a really delicious drink with basically lemonade as the base and the dragon fruit on top. It's a light flavor, but it's really good. Frigates, interceptors. Where was I? Sorry. Omegas get interceptors, but they're not worth the investment. They're overpriced. They're overrated. They're not impossible to kill. La la la. Not fastest. They're not the fastest couriers available. Shuttles out of the box are faster than an interceptor, and if you want the fastest courier potentially in the game, it's a Dramiel, rigged for it. Anyway, that's not in the book. I need to. Anyone can fly faction, but they're scalpels in a universe full of balloons and bowling balls. If you know where to stick them, excellent. If you don't, you're gonna have a bad time. There's technically a smaller class in the shuttle, but those are just over-specialized frigates for a high warp speed. Don't fear the Reaper. The free ships you get on landing naked in an empty station make excellent and delightful fragile experiments. Try and build the meanest little starter once you're further along on your journey, and see how far you can go. Strategically, you always want a frigate option or two near at hand. The ones Concord gives you for free can fit the bill, but never nearly so well as any of their costlier cousins. Signal and E-War frigates like the Vigil secretly offer the best overall utility for cost, but are generally snubbed in favor of more specialized options. I actually think NetEase has started to get rid of some of those Signal frigates, those E-War frigates, which is really frustrating, but it's a sign of where the gameplay is. There's just no way to balance the E-War effectively without making people feel like their money isn't spent well. Whales like to cry about E-War. Anyway, destroyers. Nothing but my hate and a carousel of agony. From Bad Apple, the English remaster by Richard Eby. Destroyers are the best. The smallest destroyers are about as slot efficient as the best frigates. This is true even as they're far less costly. There are no better moneyball options for making your spent ISK make more earned ISK than a destroyer. Higher level DDs approach cruiser level capabilities, but must be selective in how they apply capacitor and power grid. They are malleable and not as able to specialize as a frigate or cruiser in most cases, but there are no better jack-of-all-trades options in the galaxy. There are traps on the tree. Special modules are mostly inaccessible for alphas. The interdictors, tactical, and guardian decies can all be flown, but not nearly as effectively as an Omega can make them. Considering those special modules cost a couple $100 million ISK on the regular, they're the nichest of the niche. Unlike frigates, that tripartite fork matters less for an alpha's effectiveness. The stats for each offer some differences, but don't match the price tags. They're too flexible to be exable. I couldn't give them up if I tried. Believe me, I tried. Destroyers are coy coquettes, meant to chase and be chased. Ostensibly, they're supposed to be the best anti-frigate vessels available. That doesn't shake out in PvP when folks can trade money for capability, but in PvE, they're still easily optimized for lower levels of risk. A fine-tuned missile babe or gun bunny can lawnmower its way through a T4 base to pull great ISK, green gear, and a whole mess of T3 modules to sell, use, or reprocess. If you ever want to kill every pirate in a system, destroyers can chew through T1 and T2 rats faster than they can respawn, making them the best for Concord Pass missions and free, or paid, nanocore leveling. Ticks at half the ISK but zero risk over a break at work isn't anything to snub. String enough systems together and the raw value gets silly, even if the overall numbers seem unimpressive. Everybody laughs at Desis and until an allegiance toddles up and steals the air from their lungs, Omega as they are. The inherent Sun Chaser drive on Shan Yu and Shan Yu prototypes make them the best couriers in the game. Arguable? Yeah. The Synesis is the most cost-effective explorer in the game, but it's a lover, not a fighter. That's it. Those are all the faction destroyers of note. It's a crime, but a crime I hope to mitigate with my wish list. These are the most operationally flexible craft available. An Algo sniper can rat, mine, scan down secrets, and transport all on the same sortie. They'll never be better than a specialized craft at any of those things, but they don't need to be. Even operating at 80% capability at any given purpose compared to a smaller price point is bringing home 4 times what more than the specialist ever could have, conservatively. A well-fit destroyer is a mobile base other craft can build around. NetEase couldn't make them stronger without breaking these sleeper picks even further. Cruisers. Habataku yo in this wild night. Habataku yo in this wild night, excuse me. I think it's Korean, but I'm not sure. It's Just a Boy by Dr. Insane. That melody is haunting, and the rap that's going on in not English under it is really good. Anyway, cruisers. Cruisers are the best. In the grand scheme of things, cruisers are the most strategically flexible craft available. Destroyers rule the operational and frigates lord over the tactical, but cruisers can step in and overthrow either, and still outmaneuver bigger, beefier ISK soaks. Cruisers are workhorse vessels. They're easier to specialize than smaller craft thanks to being tuned for medium slots. Those strengths cost more, but not by much. Building batches of fleet-issue cruisers costs significantly less than a single faction ship. Resource efficiency gets tougher to manage at this scale. There are fewer options from here on out for an alpha. Most choices come down to special weapons versus turrets for aggression, and survivability versus maneuver for defenses. Special cruisers like heavy interdictors, healers, snipers, and so on can't even be flown by an alpha. Cruisers are the point where the training wheels come off. There are no alpha training ships bigger than training a cruiser. They are meant to be yeeted, but training ships cost almost double what their mainline parallels run. Making mistakes with such ships costs way less, but at a slight capability cost. Most folks don't see the appeal. Most folks don't have mining cruisers deployed in dangerous spaces, though, so that's fair. Converting warships to exploration vessels is a means of performing multiple operations as cost-effectively as possible. This becomes easier to roll in on vessels that can at least appear to defend themselves. Most of the game was meant to be played by cruisers, even if the majority of the endgame can be specialized by battleships. This is partly why faction cruisers are the most popular hunting ships along the lanes. There is value in the utility of options even if those options are less effective than specialized tools. Destroyers are the most flexible ships in the game, but are also the least specialized. Cruisers are the first class of vessel that requires real commitment. Destroyers are pocket knives. Cruisers are swords. No, you can't easily take on a bear with a pocket knife, but you can open a beer or carve a trinket or cut a rope or trim a beard or otherwise have options to better survive in the wilderness. Not every situation requires a pair-killing gun. Going hunting does. Sometimes just showing up is enough, and what can fit in a pocket is more likely to show, so I run from bears. It's good exercise. Cruisers do it better. NetEase gives the big boats treats. Cruisers help other big boats eat the big boats. Alpha industrialists have the option of selling faction cruisers, but they're above the top end of what a lone industrialist can consistently manage without a long, well-planned ramp. Fleet issue variants are more manageable, but only with commitment. The circle of life continues. Battlecruisers. It's about that time for you to release me against my will once again. Stockholm Syndrome by Evading Azrael. Oh, geez. That girl's got a set of pipes on her. I don't know if she's still singing, but she's comparable to Brody Dahl from The Distillers. Battlecruisers are the best. Take two cruisers conjoined at the hip, and that's the functional equivalent of a battlecruiser. This is the top end of what an alpha can aspire to when it comes to warships. They come in two flavors at T7, turrets versus special weapons. While specialization's costs were tangible for cruisers, here is where they become painful. Seeing your battlecruiser on the wrong end of a kill mail hurts. Having on the right end of a kill mail will make you wonder if the fight was fair. If destroyers are like puberty, battlecruisers are like hitting your 30s. They're big enough to know better, but small enough not to care. They don't get into as much trouble as cruisers, but recovering from a bad night takes days instead of hours. Battlecruisers are able to flirt with higher tier anomalies. Committing them to the cause is a big ask, and hunters can smell them. It's easier to tune them for busting bases. Specializing against T4s allows for a faster, safer clear, but less survivability from predators. Specializing against T5s and up opens up better duels against elite and survivability, but requires more setup. Still, the cost of entry is higher than can be accounted for in any short-term timeline. It's possible to get similar ticks with cruisers, destroyers, and even frigates if they're applied well. Picking up the pieces from failed fights requires more patience hauling this much beef, but with a good supply setup, that difficulty doesn't matter. Bully the same base every other day or so, long as the fight feels tricky. Battlecruisers make great homebodies, but they can still roam for missions. There are easier ways to earn ISK, but none that so softly stroke the ego. Victims. I was doing fine without you till I saw your eyes turn away from mine. The less I know, the better, by Tame Impala. Bigger ships are the best. The bigger the boat, the better the tug's gotta be, right? Battleships can do very few things. They do them very well. Alphas cannot touch these bigger brutes, but Omegas love them. This is the point where bets have teeth. Lose enough battleships and your insurance will quickly drain. Losing even one can cripple someone who doesn't have an alternative way to spend their game time. Few things are as gratifying as seeing something on the other end of your ire evaporate in a plume of debris. Big ships offer this. A battlecruiser might have to wrestle with an opponent for minutes, where a battleship could alpha that same target off the table. There is no kill like overkill. It feels good squishing flies. Getting squished by the even bigger fish after riding that high hits different. From a Moneyball perspective, overkill is wasted effort and lost value. Using the right tool for the job is the easy way. Bigger ships tune to chase the sensation of overwhelming force. The wisest of them farm in high-sec, executing criminals in a spectacle that allows some honor to the fallen. The bravest rely on gang tactics and isolation to keep their investments safe. Rarely does a battleship ever recoup its costs without increasing its debts. There is always some greater nanocore to upgrade, new fit to employ, or new top-end toy to try. Skill investments into such bigger craft preclude smaller options. The funds gained from a few runs can feed all sorts of fleets, but intoxicating numbers lure whales into the grind. Power intoxicates. It doesn't matter if it was bought and paid for with time at play or time at work. We all fall victim to the addictive impulse. If we didn't, we wouldn't eat, drink, or reproduce. Still, the body loves itself so much it's willing to kill itself to stay alive. Appreciating the pleasures of sensation without getting whipped around by them takes submission to a higher purpose. The higher whatever has got to be scarier than imagination can manage, or it won't be high enough. Power is a hell of a drug, because it's something we need to survive. when it becomes a reason to live, the shallowness of its elusive and elusive nature makes it stick. Folks can sacrifice all sorts of dignities to appear more powerful than they feel. This is the danger of the biggest boats. They risk becoming ghost ships served by people who figuratively play. Inner strength is found in stillness and silence. To be unmoved by the sounds, sights, and sensations the world visits on the self, fictional as that is, yet still feel them, is the hallmark of spiritual wellness. Real strength comes from serving others. Children demand service. Adults serve, though love isn't always comprehensible to those to whom it is given. Addiction makes children of us all. Aim it at a positive purpose and be ready to spin and spin and spin. More fitting ends. Share with me all of your pain. People Say by Portugal the Man. This game is pay to win. Most games are when it comes down to it. In a sandbox, there are no definitions for winning, other than the ones you and Charlie Sheen accept. There will always be fights outside what you can take. It's easy to misjudge a scenario where you might feel like you're bringing overwhelming force down on a ship that's been upgraded to an unassailable peak. If you can twist every loss into laughter and make a win of any explosion, there is more game here for any lifetime. If you fit yourself first, what fits you fly won't matter. All right. Part 9. Thanks for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. We might actually be able to finish the book next time. All I've got left are a few of my favorite ships and my wish list and what I would design into the game if NetEase was listening. Thanks, and have a good one. Bye. What?